if you're doing that and you're getting all that information ahead of time and getting people on board, then you can do sort of the two-step thing, which is, okay, right now in front of us, we need to amend the budget to increase it over the 5% cap. And then it's already in their minds so that you can then delete or amend the documents to get rid of that cap. And you've already reached momentum with the homeowners if you were able to persuade them initially that, this cap is it doesn't work.
HOA Insights, common sense for common areas, exists to help all 2 million volunteer board members nationwide have the right information at the right time to make the right decisions for their future. This podcast is sponsored by 4 companies that care about board members: Association Insights and Marketplace, Association Reserves, Community Financials, and Kevin Davis Insurance Services. You'll find links to their websites and social media in the show notes.
Hi, I'm Robert Nordlund of Association Reserves.
And I'm Kevin Davis of Kevin Davis Insurance Services. And this is HOA Insights, where we promote common sense
for common areas. Well, welcome to episode number 40, where we'll be speaking with insurance expert and regular co-host Kevin Davis to talk about the challenges you face when your governing documents or the law restricts your ability to lead. But before we get going, I want to encourage you to check out episode number 39, which was a fascinating conversation with a gentleman who is both a board hero and a subject matter expert, where we talk about special assessment success, how their special assessment had fixed a safety problem and boosted property values. Well, to catch prior episodes, you can listen from our podcast website, which is www.hoainsights.org, or watch the podcast from our YouTube channel. And to avoid missing any episodes, subscribe to this podcast on any of the more popular podcast platforms. And if you have a hot topic, a crazy story, or a question you'd like us to address in an upcoming episode, we'd love to hear from you. Leave us a voicemail message at 805-203-3130, or send us an email at podcast@reservestudy.com. So, Kevin, for this episode, we had a Colorado listener share the following challenge that I thought might be representative of what many boards face. The question is, what should the board do when they know they need to increase their budget to offset inflation and fund reserves, yet their bylaws require homeowner approval on any increase over 5%? And I thought that was going to be an interesting dynamic between what they're responsible to do, their decision point, the restrictions that they live within. Anyway, they say they don't have enough money in reserves. They're not setting aside 10% of their budget towards reserves to satisfy the FHA, Fannie Mae, and Freddie Mac requirements, and they're barely keeping up with inflation. Well, to this type of a challenge, we thought we'd get an expert answer, so we have a special treat for you today. We reached out to Melissa Garcia, a noted attorney with the Altitude Community Law Firm with multiple locations throughout Colorado. And you can get in touch with Melissa or one of their other attorneys at altitude.law. So, Melissa, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Obviously, I love these kinds of things and being able to communicating whatever kind of best practices we can communicate to whoever is willing to listen. So thank you for having me.
So, what kind of advice can we give to this board member who's kind of stuck between governing documents that limit their assessment increases and knowing that just inflation is eating them up? So how do they catch up?
It's not even just inflation. In Colorado, we are hit with a lot of things. We have insurance costs that are skyrocketing that was kind of out of left field. We have a legislation that was passed a couple of years ago that has necessitated increased costs for collections and enforcement. So there's a lot. And of course, we've got the tail end of COVID. People are still recovering that. So there's a lot that's happening that's kind of caught boards off guard and made something that wasn't really an urgent issue. And I think that's one of the problems right there, is not seeing reserves or not seeing funding proactively as an urgent issue. And it's caught them off guard. So there's a lot of problems. And the issue that you raised, the 5% cap, sometimes we'll see a 3% cap, sometimes a 10% cap. It is common in a lot of the older governing documents in Colorado, what is called a maximum annual assessment. So every year you get something. And so, unfortunately, if you're looking at how to raise the budget and you've got this cap, there's really, instead of how to maybe fund your, coffers some other way, but actually how to increase the budget with this cap, there's really only, in my mind, two ways of doing this. I mean, one, which is get rid of the cap. And we'll talk a little bit about that, the amending of the governing documents to get rid of the cap. But I think the better way and the techniques used for this better way is to actually convince the members, which is convincing the community to approve the increase over that 5%. And if you're doing that and you're getting all that information ahead of time and getting people on board, educating them and everything, then you can do sort of a two-step thing, which is, okay, right now in front of us, we need to amend the budget to increase it over the 5% cap. We'll talk about why. And then it's already in their minds so that you can then delete or amend the documents to get rid of that cap. And you've already reached momentum with the homeowners if you were able to persuade them initially that, this cap is it doesn't work.
Not in the best interest of the association, right?
So I think on the front end, when you're trying to convince it, here's where I see a lot of boards go, don't go down the right path. They essentially just go to the annual meeting and they say, we need an increase in the budget and this is how much and this is why. And there's not really as much preparation ahead of time to get all the homeowners to understand and why we need this. There's not a lot of education. They don't maybe have the numbers in place, specific numbers, not just here's what we have in the budget for next year. This is why we need it. The numbers of, well, why? Why do you need it? And why is this happening now? Why do we have these insurance increases? Why do we have these collections increases? And I think the other thing that you can do prior to that annual meeting, which is typically where you would get the budget increased, is prepare them, over communicate prior to that meeting, and educate them, tell them why this is what we're going to be doing at the annual meeting. And we want you prepared and we want you to come with questions. Here's the long-term impact if we don't increase the budget now. Here's the short-term impact. Here's what some of the consequences that are going to happen. We're going to have to get rid of services. We're going to have the roof falling down, whatever it is. Have all that information ready. And also, there's always neighborhood naysayers. I mean, that's just typical.
Right.
Be ready for whatever their concerns are. I mean, the last thing you want is somebody to sort of pull the rug from underneath you because you can't address that very specific concern that's obviously going to come up at the annual meeting. So a lot of proactive education. Another thing too is I think the problem I sometimes see is how it's presented to the homeowners. You need to have that right communicator, the good communicator that's able to sway and to influence and to speak at the level of those who aren't on the board so they can explain everything. So it doesn't look like, you're hiding behind the skirts of an attorney. Maybe if you have an attorney, it's going to come. Sometimes it's a great thing. Sometimes it's a bad thing. So I think it depends on the community. Also, just getting the homeowners involved early on. Maybe there's a task force about some of these issues with finances, and maybe you have if you get others involved, so it's not just that board. And there's this invisible wall that comes up in front of the board. It's not us against them. You get more people involved, their eyes are opened, and all of a sudden they have more ownership about the decision-making processes moving forward, and they can communicate with you. I think it's really important to just have all your ducks in a row and just get as many people involved as possible so people aren't getting hit from left field.
Right. It's not board versus the homeowners. You can get allies
and it's a knee-jerk reaction. It's a knee-jerk reaction if you don't do that. So, and then on the other piece, if, just amending this type of cap it just doesn't work today. It just doesn't. You never know what's going to hit you, regardless of inflation. You just never know what's going to hit you. Right. The best way to do it is to, if you're able to get them to increase it over 5%, then amend the documents, which sometimes it's a high percentage. I don't know in other states, but here it can't be any higher than 67% of the entire community. It can't be any lower than 51%. But you amend it in a way that doesn't just increase the cap, because that just prolongs the problem. You amend it so that you change the process. And we have a lovely thing called the veto process here that is applicable to all the newer communities, but not the older ones. So the older ones have the caps. If you amend to get rid of that cap and just say, here's the budget, we're going to propose it to you every year. And then you come and you have the opportunity to veto that budget. That's very different than having to get approval, because then it becomes a two-way street and boards' hands aren't tied because they can't get people to show up at the meeting to approve a budget. Instead, it's, hey, show up if you care about the community and you have a voice, and you can veto it if you think, we're out of our minds with this.
Interesting.
Increase.
There's still checks and balances.
Yes.
Right. Well, fantastic. What I heard you talking about was, don't just walk into the annual meeting and bracing for the homeowners to say, vote for their pocketbooks, and just say, well, given a choice of a little bit more or a little bit less, I vote for a little bit less. Because that's, you know what the answer to that question is. So prepare, build consensus, educate in advance, maybe get your emissaries out there when they're walking in the hallways, walking their dogs, playing tennis, whatever, touching other people and building a momentum to the idea that, we need to do this at our association. And then, to eliminate the problem by amending the requirement. So good stuff.
Yes. I mean, I think there's, unfortunately, and I touched on this in the beginning, it's not an urgent issue until it becomes an urgent issue. It's sort of like if you don't draft a will because you don't think you're ever going to die, you don't take care of that. It doesn't, and then all of a sudden, you're in the hospital. So it's the same thing. And I think more and more these days, the decisions that boards make are being scrutinized more. And I think the ones that hit the pocketbook are scrutinized the most. And so those are the ones where you really want to over communicate and know who the person on the board or in your, a committee person, whomever it is, that has that way of communicating. Because you can have two people say the same thing in an annual meeting or write the same newsletter, and it's going to come out differently. So know who that is. I think that's more important than many think. It's hard when you're on the board because you're often on the defense, and you're often what's the phrase about the deer in the headlights,
right?
And unfortunately, because of that invisible wall, any chance you can do to break down that wall, it's going to happen through communication. Otherwise, you're going to get that knee-jerk reaction that you only want more money because of something you want. Right. It's not going to help the community in general, even though the board might have spent 20 hours going over how can we do this? What's the most feasible option?
Yeah.
What's going to impact the greatest with the least amount of effort? If you don't communicate that, unfortunately, there's apathy in communities, and so they don't really. A lot of members don't attend board meetings, so you don't have that opportunity because they don't come to the board meetings. They only come to the annual meeting ready to fight. So throughout the year, proactive communication. Pushing, maybe strategic planning every single year at the beginning of the year, saying this is what we need to do. By the time we get to November or October, or December to discuss the annual meeting for next year, guess what? It's not even going to be an issue. Everybody will know. So a lot of
status points throughout the year. Yeah. Making it ongoing. This is how we are doing at our community. It's not the board versus the homeowners. It's our community. You've heard about inflation. You've heard about insurance. Your personal insurance is going up, whatever it is. I think board members often think of their role as running the association and not, in this case, they need to be salesmen. And someone, like you say, someone has the best salesman voice, salesman hat. Maybe that's the board member who's at the door welcoming people to the annual meeting, someone with that friendly face, or a committee person, or the manager, someone on the team. But yeah, you need to stack your ducks, get
and
things
use
ready.
Your experts. Yeah. And also just use your experts. So you don't have to go out and be an attorney or an accountant or reserve study specialist or anyone if you're on the board, but you should be asking those questions from everyone. So you have the data. If it makes sense, have those experts at your meeting. A lot of times, I mean, that's their bailiwick. They're going to be up there with the presentations of why, if you don't increase it, here are all the bad things that are going to happen. So, I mean, that comes out of the expert's mouth better. So sometimes it makes sense to bring your experts to the annual meeting or let them have a Q&A session, whatever it is. I think the other thing too, and this is more of a last resort, if you can't get an amendment or you can't get that budget increased, that it's still, I mean, you could do it incrementally. Just try, unfortunately, you're probably going to have to cut services here or something, but you'll get to it at some point. One last point, we didn't really talk about the consequences, but also just what's on everybody's mind is when they're selling their units, you want to be able to, maximize the property values, and here's how you do it. And this is one way, even though it might be hitting you in the pocket right now, guess what? This is going to be very favorable for you if you're trying to refi or sell. Those are the things that they should concentrate on as well.
Yeah, those are the sales points. Well, Melissa, it's been fantastic. To everyone listening, this is exactly the value of having an expert on your side. So, Melissa, we look forward to having you back on the program at a future point in time. And thank you again for your time here today.
Thank you so much, Robert.
We'll be right back after a quick break to hear from one of our sponsors.
Is your HOA or condo self-managed and you don't want to work as hard volunteering? Are you full managed and looking to save money? Or are you looking to split the accounting from a manager's role for better service? Let Community Financials handle the monthly accounting for you. We collect dues, pay bills, produce financial reports, include portals, and help with other support services, all while providing awesome service. We'd love the opportunity to help you make your community accounting stress-free with our industry-leading systems and expert team. Visit our website, communityfinancials.com, to learn more.
And we're back. So, Kevin, what struck you about Melissa's response?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. She did a great job in talking about some of the things that need to be done, especially the education part of it, and she has some great solutions. The thing is, for me, is that when you talk about needing to raise assessments or needing to increase the budget, it's different than must. It's the board's responsibility to enforce the documents, right? It's their responsibility to handle the financial situation and to maintain the common area. That's their job to do. They have to make decisions about that. When you talk about the budget, it impacts two of them, the finances, and it impacts the maintenance of the association. So when they fail to do that, when they fail to make the proper choices, they have to make an informed decision at the end of the day. When they make that informed decision, it stops them from really getting in trouble, because it's about breach of fiduciary duty. That's the key word that Melissa didn't talk about. It's their duty to make sure the budget is handled correctly. Costs have increased, Robert. I'm paying more money, you're paying more money. The difference is that I can't say that I'm not going to pay my electric bill. I'm not going to pay my insurance bill. I got to figure out a way to pay it. The associations must figure the same thing out. They have to do it.
I like that. You've got to figure out a way. I think
yes.
What this, the Colorado listener was talking about was almost an excuse to raise their hands and surrender. Is that okay? Is that my excuse for not doing what I'm supposed to do? And I think what Melissa talked about was you've got to just double down and work hard. You can't use an excuse that, well, the homeowners didn't want it. Well, that just means that you didn't try enough as a board member. Is that fair?
Exactly. No decision is a decision. Kicking the can down the road is a decision. Passing a buck and putting your hands up is a decision. And boards have to understand that is a decision. And that decision come back and haunt them again when that word breach of fiduciary duty, because it's their responsibility to handle the finances. They must do it. They don't have a choice.
Yeah. Okay. When I don't have a choice, I am up late. I am up early. I don't sleep well. I may miss a meal because I'm trying to figure it out. And I think that's maybe what we're trying to encourage board members here, sometimes your job does get challenging if you have constraints, because if you just let it go, then you just have a bigger problem next year. So how can we convene a town hall meeting? How can we convince the board members of what not the board members, the homeowners, of what we know? We know it has to happen. That's why we're willing to put our money into this too. We're ready to raise our assessments. We think it's a strong idea. Do you get that sense of urgency?
Exactly. And that's the key word there, because again, if your insurance goes up and your electric goes up and the motor grass and all that stuff goes up, you talk to your wife, you sit down, you communicate and say, this is what we have to do. We may have to cut back. We may have to say, well, we can't have cable anymore. But you have to make decisions together. The same thing that the board has to do. And the more urgency that you just mentioned, that word urgency, the more urgency it is, the tougher the conversations are. The tough decision you got to make. But like you and your wife will make those kinds of decisions and agree that maybe the cable may have to go or going out to dinner may have to go. The board and the unit owners, people who live there, got to make decisions together and say, okay, we have a choice. If we can't increase the assessments, we have to do something in order to make sure these bills get paid. And again, when let's talk about communication, it's the same thing, communication at home. How can we make these decisions about paying our insurance bill this year when we know that insurance goes up? We go out, we communicate, we talk, and we make decisions together. We don't put our hands up in the air and say, well, hopefully that, the rates will go down or they won't understand, They won't cancel us. And that's where it goes. Too often the boards throw their hands up in the air and say, we don't have a choice. One thing we didn't, she talked about a little bit, that I think it's important, is the use of experts, outside experts, but experts who focuses in on community association experts. You as a reserve specialist, me as an insurance specialist, her as a lawyer who specializes in community associations.
Right.
Because as an insurance person, I can tell them that if you don't make informed decisions, you will be sued.
I want to follow up on that. We have the board. They know what were rough numbers. Inflation was 5, 6, 7%, and this association has 5% budget limit. The board knows they have a jam, and they know that mid-year, so they need to start thinking with urgency. Let's presume it's a December fiscal year end. They need to start thinking in spring or June that we got to have a town hall. We've got to tell everyone, all the homeowners, what's going on. They've got to get their ducks in order. And it's going to be hard work. But when you talk about communication, how valuable would it be for the board to have a record? We decided this. We decided we're going to have a town hall. We decided we're going to do this. How important is it to have a record of how hard they worked in case someone sues them the next year?
And that's it. Because again, at the end of the day, we're looking for the decision they make. Was it an informed decision? Not it was a right or wrong decision, but was it based on information? Did they do step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4? They did look at the documents and understand the documents allowed them to go 5%. But in a situation right there, they have to do 10%. They have to go out. Now, they can come back and get sued, but at the end of the day, they're going to go to the court and say, listen, we had to make this decision because we can't afford not to make this decision. Because we're going to be sued no matter what. If we make a decision to increase it or not increase it, we're still opening ourselves up for a breach of fiduciary lawsuit because the board either failed to maintain a common area or they spend too much money, try to collect the waste of corporate assets and try it. So it's a tricky thing, but that informed decision allowed them to go into court and say, guess what? We did our jobs. We made a decision based on this information and we lived by it. And most judges at that point in time, because they are volunteers, will not hold them accountable as much as making wait a minute, we don't know what to do now, and just walk away.
Okay. Two things. Are you talking about in this situation where the board knows they have a 5% limit, are you talking about the board just raising assessments 7% and just breaking through that limitation?
I would say no. I would say understanding the limitation of 5%.
Okay. And working within that. Okay. Because that's more what I was thinking. Go down the communication path. And because usually when they have a 5% limit, it's unless they get a vote of approval from the homeowners. And I think that's what I was hoping to talk about. And that's what your thoughts also?
Exactly.
Okay.
They have a 5% limitation. They understand the documents. They have to be able to go out there and educate the unit owners the people who live there and say, we need a 7% this year, just like you need 7% now because your costs have gone up. In other words, again, we must have this as opposed to, it would make me feel comfortable as a board to get here. The sense of urgency is there. And when you have a sense of urgency, people in there hopefully can understand the sense of urgency because, again, we're all in the same boat. But if they don't, that's where the issue comes into play. Sometimes you're going to have to just, do a little bit more than you have to make decisions. It's just,
right.
I'm not a lawyer to say what decision you can make, but at the end of the day, they have to make that decision, and a decision has to be an informed one.
Got it. Well, what I think there's another side to this, or maybe two sides in my notes here. Board members, you got into this situation because you're a volunteer. And now you're realizing it's not just going to the meeting. It's not just making an informed decision. It's going to be some hard work. I need to be proactive. We need to plan a town hall. We need to get the information in order. We may need to have an expert come to our next board meeting, and that may cost a few $100s. So it's getting that information together. And it's going to be some hard work, and that is unfortunate. And that's probably the last thing we want to be telling our audience. But I think we need to tell them clearly, being a board member is hard work, and sometimes governing documents and state law make it a little bit harder. The other thing, the gem, the prize that Melissa mentioned was property values.
Yes.
Why are we talking about a 5% or a 7% increase when we're talking about what it will do to give us tens of thousands of dollars increase to our property values, or keep our property values from dropping tens of thousands of dollars? The big picture is always property values. And so they've got to be able to play that card with strength and say that, folks, yes, it's going to cost us another $17.52 per month, but our property values are at risk here.
And the exact opposite is true also, because one thing Melissa said, the word consequences are consequences. The consequences is this: the property values go down. And that is a bigger problem. And people may understand negativity more than positivity. People may not understand that, well, guess what? Your property value will increase. Okay, that's good. But guess what? You will lose the value of property. You don't want your property values to diminish by 10, 15%. You want the condo next door to you to be worth more than yours when it comes time for you to sell your unit. You realize that they're getting more money for that because guess what they've done? They paid their assessments. They increased their assessments. They kept up. Yeah. So I would focus in on the other part of it, which is, the consequences are loss of value more so than gain of value, because people, we all want to lose money. When we go gambling, the thought of us losing a lot more money, it makes us more depressed than how much money.
That's scary. That's scary. Yeah.
That's the scary part.
Yeah. I think that's the big deal. That's the big card that you have up your sleeve, the board talking about property values, because like you say, you don't want, when it comes time to sell, your time may not be this year, your time may be 5 or 10 years from now, but there's always someone there, and you don't want the association next door to be the one that got painted, the one that the asphalt is smooth, the one that the gate opens and closes regularly. It's not broken open. That takes money. Owning property is expensive. And we're talking about a situation here where you've got to keep up and make that point to the homeowners. And Kevin, we come back to, I guess, two things: urgency and communication.
Yeah. That's it. Education is a key also there. Educating the unit owners about the importance based on their own personal experiences. Guess what? Right now, we're all paying more money than we paid before. The cost of living has increased. So we have to be prepared, and we have to make these difficult choices. We have to do it. It is not something we like. We're doing it because we think it'll be better for this. We must do it, because if we don't, it'll come back to haunt us later on. We can't kick the can down the road any longer.
The consequences are too bad. Well, thank you, Kevin. It's always a great opportunity to speak with you. Any closing thoughts as we wrap up this program?
We talk about hope a lot in these things, and I have to tell you that the boards are understanding, and people who live in these community associates understanding. I expect to see a lot more claims in this area, but guess what? We haven't. And so the communication is happening, and people are understanding that the cost is greater. It costs a lot more money. And so I will tell you right now that we're not seeing what I thought we would see. So that's the good news.
That's the good news. Well, To our audience, we hope you are joining us in understanding that sometimes being a board member is hard work and it takes commitment, communication. There's a few other C words, but we hope you learned some HOA insights from our discussion today that helps you bring common sense to your common area. We look forward to having you join us for another great episode next week.
You've been listening to HOA Insights, Common Sense for Common Areas. You can listen to the show on our podcast website, hoainsights.org, or subscribe on any of the most popular podcast platforms. You can also watch the show on our YouTube channel. Check the show notes for helpful links. If you like the show and want to support the work we do, you can do so in a number of ways. The most important thing that you can do is engage in the conversation. Leave a question in the comment section on our YouTube videos. You can also email your questions or voice memos to podcast@reservestudy.com or leave us a voicemail at 805-203-3130. If you gain any insights from the show, please do us a huge favor by sharing the show with other board members that you know. You can also support us by supporting the brands that support this program. Please remember that the views and opinions expressed by the podcast do not constitute legal advice. You'll want to consult your own legal counsel before making any important decisions. Finally, this podcast was expertly mixed and mastered by Stokelight Video and Marketing. With Stokelight on your team, you'll reach more customers with marketing expertise that inspires action. See the show notes to connect with Stokelight.